Good morning to you. You ready? GM Meek starts in earnest.
I mean, who's not ready for the GM meetings, especially when they're in Las Vegas, right?
Was your flight delay over under 7 hours?
I actually, knock on wood, had no delays.
Stop it right now.
Made my connection.
You're winning.
The whole thing
Don't
was
even
great.
play blackjack.
Good start to the week.
Kyle Tucker doesn't need to play blackjack. That is for sure. We started months ago. The number was 500 million. Where are we at this point?
I'm not sure we're going to get to 500 million. I think 400 million is realistic, though not guaranteed. He didn't have a great year. He had a really good first half. He had that hand injury that sort of hampered him into the summer, missed the last few weeks with a calf strain. So, when you're talking about a free agent of this magnitude, there's only a limited number of teams you're really going to be talking about. So the question is, which of those big market teams are going to be in on him? He will have a market. He will make a lot of money this winter. I feel like with Kyle Tucker, the contract itself might be just as intriguing and interesting as which team he ends up with.
Do you think it extends deep into the offseason? What's the timing of it in your mind?
Well, I think because it's a more limited market, you're not looking at 10, 12 teams that are out there. I think they'll have an idea pretty early which teams are in on him. So I don't know that it's going to be, plus when you're talking about teams that are thinking about committing $300, $400 million to a guy, they can't go deep into the winter because that's going to affect what they do the rest of the winter. So, if you told me he's going to sign at the winter meetings, I wouldn't be stunned.
If I told you Cubs, would you be stunned?
Yes.
You would be stunned. Okay. What about for Alex Bregman? The marriage in Boston signed so late, Mark. It was in February. The marriage seemed perfect. What are the chances he goes back there?
I think there's a pretty good chance that he winds up back there. They obviously shed a big salary by trading Rafael Devers last year. Bregman, like you said, was a perfect fit. They love the leadership he provided there. They've got a lot of young players. He opted out of the deal. It was 2 years and $80 million, but with the deferrals, it was more like 60. I think he's looking for something long-term security. He's in his early 30s. Didn't want to go with a 2-year deal to put him out in free agency at 33. So I could see Alex Bregman going back to Boston on a longer-term deal, a little lesser AAV than the 40 million or even the 30 million, probably that range. There are going to be other teams in on him as well, but I think that the fit in Boston is so perfect. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he stays
What
there.
other teams? Other AL East teams? Yankees come to mind?
No, I mean, the Yankees just traded for Ryan McMahon last summer. He's got a couple years left on his contract. I don't see that being a great fit. The Mets are a team that's always going to be in the mix there. A lot of that will depend on what happens with Pete Alonso. If Pete Alonso signs somewhere else, they can move Mark Vientos to first. Maybe Brett Beatty goes to second. That opens up third base for Bregman. So I think the Mets are a team to watch if Pete Alonso doesn't return to New York.
To your point of the timing of the big name free agents, Craig Breslow, I'm sure, is on it in Boston. You're here for the GM meetings. 3 new president of baseball ops, although hardly new to the game, just new to their respective teams. What does this week look like for them?
Well, each of them have a very different situation, right? Chaim Bloom in St. Louis has been with the team for a couple of years as an advisor to John Mozeliak, so he's very familiar with the inner workings of their team. He's been helping sort of mold where they're headed. He's obviously run 2 teams before, so it's not like he has to get here and establish relationships in this role, but now he's in charge in St. Louis, and so it'll be interesting to see how does he approach this winter. Do they go out and sign free agents? Last year, they didn't sign a free agent until middle of spring training. So are they going to be a little more aggressive this winter? Paul Taboni in Washington got a nice young core, a lot of outfielders, got to figure out that whole situation. He's a first-time head of baseball operations. So, for Paul, he's got to figure out how do you approach this part of the season in this role. The last one is Paul DePodesta, who's been in this role before, but not for 10 years. He's been in the National Football League for the last 10 years. So he's got to sort of reintroduce himself. He's also got the hardest job in that the Rockies have the longest rebuild ahead of them. Washington's got some really good young players. They've got a little money to spend, I think.
They're on their way.
They're on their way. You can see the addition of a few players on the Washington Nationals could be on their way up. The Rockies have a lot of work ahead of them. DePodesta still wants to hire a GM. He's got to start figuring that out. And, the Rockies have a long way to go to get back to contention.
For you as an insider, you spend this week with new general managers. Even though you know these men, do you start relationships with them? I wonder how that goes for you.
The GM meetings is a great opportunity for us just because it's a little more low key.
More access.
More access, and the winter meetings are just everybody's running around like chickens without heads, right? You barely see people. They're up in their suites. They're in meetings. They're not roaming the lobby. There's the job fair. There's hundreds of people running around. The GM meetings are a little more low key. Although I don't know if Vegas can really be considered low key at all because you're looking for people while you're watching people play blackjack.
Sure.
So it's a little different, but. Yeah, it's certainly a better opportunity to try to get to know some people and establish some of those relationships.
The Blue Jays top of mind, one game short of the promised land. What is on their checklist? I think I know the answer to this question in this offseason.
Well, I think you know what number one is, and that's to bring Bo Bichette back. And it's interesting because a year ago, most people thought this was going to be his last year. He might even be traded at the deadline, depending on how things had gone with their season. Obviously, he had a big bounce back season. The Blue Jays had a huge bounce back season, and now it seems like there's a lot of momentum to bring him back on both sides. I think he wants to stay and finish that job, continue playing with Vladdy and sort of ride this thing out in Toronto. But we'll see what the check looks like at the end of the day, because that's going to probably determine whether Bo Bichette returns. They also have to figure out some stuff in their rotation. Chris Bassett's a free agent. Max Scherzer's a free agent. Kevin Gausman's a free agent next year. So, they've definitely got some work to do, but it's all right there for them.
Were you surprised Shane Bieber came back? We loved it. We talked about it on Hot Stove. They stayed with him during injury, and then he rewarded him at the end of the day. Were you surprised by it at the time?
I was, only because I think based on how he pitched this year, I thought he could have commanded certainly a multi-year deal for more money, but going to the World Series, there's something to be said for that, and I think he felt very comfortable there. He liked it there, and really sees that this is a chance to go and finish that job next year. So yeah, it's always encouraging to see that kind of thing happen.
Do you think Bo Bichette, seeing a country united like that and that team perform on the biggest stage like that, changes how he feels, makes him feel a certain way, Mark?
Yeah, I think he wants to go back to Toronto if all things are equal. But the question is, will another team come in over the top and try to, pry him away from Toronto with a much bigger offer? Look, the Blue Jays have money. They can pay him. They paid Vladdy $500 million. They can pay Bo Bichette if they want to. The question is, what's that number going to look like? I'd be surprised if he doesn't wind up back there, just because I think it's such a good fit and they have such a good thing going. Like you said, one game away from winning the World Series. I think he sees that. If they hadn't gotten to the playoffs this year, or if they had been a first-round exit again, they'd never won a playoff game with Bo and Vladdy before this year, things might have been different. But the fact that they got as close as they did, I think Bo Bichette looks at it and says, this is not only the place I'm comfortable and happy, but this is the place where we can win the World Series.
What will the Giants do? I was listening to MLB Network Radio the other day, and they made a good point. They're not getting Tony Vitello and Buster Posey kind of making all these moves, the mastermind of it all, to not go for it. What do you think they're off? It's an interesting offseason, I think. What do you think?
I think pitching is going to be the priority. They've got, they brought in Devers last year. They have some bats there, but they do need some help in the rotation beyond their top couple guys. I don't think they're going to go for the top level pitchers on the free agent market, because that's not something they've traditionally done. They don't like to take that risk, knowing the kind of injuries that pitchers can incur. But I do see them going out and looking at some of the better pitchers on the market who can go on a shorter deal. Maybe you're looking at a Merrill Kelly. Maybe you're looking at a Chris Bassett, somebody like that. Maybe Zach Littell. I think there are guys out there who can help them and make them better and stabilize that rotation. They're in a very tough division with the Dodgers, with the Padres. The Diamondbacks are going to be back this year. So they've got some work to do, but I think that it's doable.